Kneel. You are in the presence of your emperor, Claude de Obelia. I was the second son of the Obelian imperial line. My fiancé abandoned me. My elder brother betrayed me, so I killed him and took the throne. I cannot trust anyone. Not my deceased brother, not Penelope, not even the squabbling, fickle nobles. Everything was meaningless. Until I met Diana. But she disappeared from my life, leaving only this cretin behind. I could not bear to live in this worthless world, so I turned to black magic to forget it all. Who is this girl? Why does this thing have my mana inside it? What? You're telling me 9 years have passed? I have a daughter? I built a rose garden for her? What are these pictures doing on my bed? I commissioned a royal portrait? Madness. This is all wrong. Diana, why are you gone while that thing still lives? That man in the portrait is not me. I don't understand. It's all that thing's fault. I'll rid myself of it. Yes, once she's gone, I'll be at ease.
Do you like Who Made Me a Princess? Great, I assume you do if you're watching this video. I've already made 3 other videos on the series, 2 of which sing its praise to high hell, so it's pretty clear that I think this webtoon's really good. If you haven't watched my previous videos on the topic, then I highly recommend you do so, but you can skip that first one as that one sucks. Watch the other 2 though. They're pretty good if I do say so myself. Alright, I wasted enough of your time, so I'm just gonna get into it. Warning, the following sequence contains a controversial opinion that might trigger the fan base. Please do not ask me to commit Sudoku or send ninja assassins after me. So if it wasn't already clear from that preview sequence, Claude de Obelia doesn't remember a thing. We've gone through one hell of a journey developing the relationship between Athanasia and Claude, but the author has the balls to rip that away from us using the amnesia card. This is like booting up your game console and finding your save data deleted. Okay, maybe not that bad, but regardless, it's a risky direction to take your story. Anyway, Claude shoots a glare at this unknown girl in front of him and notices that she has his mana signature inside her. This elicits a violent reaction and really goes to show that these two are actually related. Claude, understandably, has a hard time coming to terms with his radical change in lifestyle. He somehow begins to accept that he lost 9 years of memories after combing through the Empire's paperwork, but what really shakes him are the little changes. This is the same Claude with all the emotional baggage of his youth, so imagine for a moment that one day your decade younger self wakes up and is being told you have a 14-year-old daughter whom you dote on. With all of the irrefutable evidence just lying around, yeah, I'd be a little shaken myself, emotional issues or otherwise. Claude wanders around the entire palace, and even he seems to realize that his body is remembering things that his mind does not. I find it amusing how Felix was so invested in Claude's growth that he's desperately shoving reminders of Claude's affections for Athanasia in his face. It's even more entertaining to see how Felix is starting to get real sick of Claude's denial bullshit. There's a certain satisfaction to be had here because Felix is the only character who can feasibly get away with this brazen behavior. One of the low-key highlight moments is when Claude tries to pull the old glare card to stop Felix's incessant barrage of reminders, to which Felix basically responds with,
"Glaring at me doesn't make your problems go away."
Claude's reaction to this response is priceless in many ways because not only does the gravity of his situation truly begin to hit him, but he's not used to anyone actually being able to confront him. 10 points to Felix. He's characterized pretty well for a side character. It's just too bad his love life is hopeless. The goodness doesn't stop there because the pair head over to Claude's chambers only to find Athanasia's crayon art plastered over the headboard. This development comes as a pleasant surprise to Felix, who rejoices at the newfound tangible proof of pre-amnesia Claude's growth. However, this development also comes as a major psychological blow to Claude. This is not the face of a man who can process what's going on. And this is probably the first time we get to see Claude as the butt of a joke. There is some sick satisfaction to be had in watching this man's mental blue screen of death. However, this moment of levity ends when Felix reveals that Claude commissioned a royal portrait. The next several events after this moment are just so perfect on so many levels. Claude looks upon his commissioned portrait, and it is here where he's forcibly made to accept the reality of his situation for realsies. Take a look at it. A real good look at it. Notice anything? Well, so does Claude. He looks pretty content, if not happy, in the portrait. Keep in mind that his current younger self is the one from darker times, so it's completely understandable he's extremely bothered by this. The Claude on screen has not moved on from his neglected childhood, an engagement gone wrong, fratricide, and lost love. You really think a guy like this is going to accept that he's supposed to be happy now without remembering how he came to internalize and move on from all this? Don't worry, I'm going to go into vivid detail about this fantastic moment and all the wild stuff that happens in my next section. But, to prelude my big point, I'd like to introduce you all to a psychological phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance. You can look up the technicalities for yourself, but to simplify it down, it's an inconsistency between one's thoughts and one's actions. Generally speaking, people suffer from psychological stress when what they believe and what they actually do don't harmonize. Now remember that, because it neatly explains everything that happens to Claude from here on. Later that evening, Claude introspects while thinking about Diana, only to discover for a second time that he resents his daughter for inadvertently causing Diana's death. That wound is still fresh to this amnesia Claude, so he firmly believes that he can't be happy with all of this pain that he feels. Yet at the same time, everyone and everything around him suggest otherwise, which creates a very uncomfortable situation for him. This inner turmoil is so extreme that he begins to suffer from insomnia just because he doesn't know how to deal with these two opposing frames of mind. The thing about cognitive dissonance is that people usually do everything in their power to coincide their thoughts and actions to make them consistent. Thank you, Wikipedia, for that line. Considering that Athanasia seems to be at the core of his supposed happiness, he has two options here. 1. Change his beliefs about being unhappy and just accept what everyone and everything else has been telling him. Or 2. Change his actions to reflect his unhappy state of mind. In other words, getting rid of Athanasia. Now, between changing the way you think and changing the things you do, I think it's fair to say that changing your actions is the easier option. So, lo and behold, while everyone's wishing him a happy birthday, one of the nobles inquires about Athanasia's absence, and Claude, in his sleep-deprived and psychologically stressed state, decides to order his guards to forcibly bring her to him. These guards do not understand what they're doing and why they're doing it either. They have no clue why anything's happening, and as such, they're really reluctant to carry out a direct order from the Emperor. However, Athanasia is brought before Claude, and he uses this as an opportunity to repair his psychological state by condemning her. Considering we were just off of the emotional high of the debutante ball not that long ago, this is another high in a very different sense. The way everything develops is breathtaking. Athanasia's been waiting in the garden for days, taking tea alone and hoping her father would miraculously recover, only for her to come face to face with the ending she desperately sought to avoid. What gives the scene even more impact is how the entire story so far was about these two learning to love one another, so this is definitely going to sting for both Athi and the reader. This scene is so close to perfection it's not even funny. The only way I could possibly make it any better is to have Claude follow the scripted story and have Athanasia executed. And a part of me really wanted this to happen. It would have been one of the most amazing tragic, if not the most tragic narratives I would have ever had the privilege to read through. Unfortunately, even I know that killing off Athanasia would have destroyed this series because then we'd have to continue it through Jeanette's eyes. And I've recently been made aware just how disliked Jeanette is in the fandom. Sure, such a development would have emotionally wrecked some of you,
but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
All jokes aside though, if the story played out as I had hoped, then this would have easily been an unforgettable experience. Well, fingers crossed that someone watches my video and pitches the idea of an alternate ending to Plutus and Spoon. Anyway, back on topic. Athanasia will not be subject to this bad ending, so she puts on the plot armor, reveals her magical abilities, wishes her father a happy birthday, but not actually a happy birthday, and runs off to deal with her newfound emotional crisis. Now I'm going to cut the plot summary short here just because it would ruin the flow of the video if I continued. Everything that comes after this pivotal moment in Season 2 can be considered disappointing. Not because the storytelling gets worse, no, that stays consistently good. It's just that Season 2 starts off with its greatest moment from the very beginning. It's almost a crime how the story slows down after this explosive opening and ends the season on a whimper. I almost feel like the creators did this intentionally to screw with the audience.
You sick bastards! Why do you torment me so?
Please, sir, I want some more.
If you haven't figured it out already, the theme of today's video is cognitive dissonance, the inconsistency between one's thoughts and their actions. I said it earlier, but this phenomenon usually creates psychological stress when recognized by the victim and usually elicits a very prompt response to fix it. There are even times when you can use this stuff to your advantage. For example, If you had a bad day, you're taking one down, something something, work at a smile and you go for a ride, you'll notice that you don't feel as bad. Why is that? Simple. If you can force yourself to smile while being really sad in the moment, you're forcing yourself to experience cognitive dissonance. You naturally cannot comprehend this inconsistency, therefore one of two things will happen. You either stop smiling, or you convince yourself that, hey, maybe things aren't so bad after all if I can crack a smile. This is why people constantly tell you to look on the bright side when you're down. They innately know this, but I imagine not a lot of people understand why. Well, now you know. On the darker side of things, if you're going through a bad breakup with a lover or friend, then it's almost always recommended to get rid of any mementos or intimate photos. Why? Again, cognitive dissonance. How are you supposed to convince yourself to move on when you're surrounding yourself with all of these reminders of your great moments together? The very act of you keeping them around usually doesn't coincide well with any belief that you've moved on. Now, that's not to say this is a hard fact. Something complex like human relationships can hardly be simplified into a single phenomenon. Furthermore, I am not a psychologist. Most of my examples right now come secondhand from someone who is, or just speculative application of said concept on my part. I do not offer this information as relationship advice, and any explanations right now are simply being used to support my point. But if I had to teach someone about all the ins and outs of cognitive dissonance as I understand it, then I'd probably use the near perfect examples demonstrated in this webtoon. When you stop and consider both Athanasia and Claude for a moment, you come to realize that they both work through the psychological phenomenon in opposite ways. Athanasia's growing affection for Claude in the earlier chapters can be explained using elements of cognitive dissonance. After being discovered by Claude and having her plan to run away foiled, she has to suck up to him. Her actions and overt displays of affection do not coincide with her initial beliefs that he is a madman. However, she cannot change her actions, or at the very least, she does not believe that she has the option to change her actions. Therefore, to mitigate any further psychological stress on top of worrying for her life, one can't suspect that her mindset changes to see Claude in a more favorable light. After all, if you constantly do something day in and day out, it won't come as a surprise to anyone if you one day believe that what you're doing is actually real. I know this kind of undermines the touching development between father and daughter, but I do see some elements of self-inflicted mind manipulation in Athanasia. In Claude's case, he doesn't believe that changing his grieving mindset is an option for him. Therefore, in a moment of weakness, he naturally attempts to take steps to remove anything that might suggest otherwise, namely Athi. Another option you could take to deal with cognitive dissonance is to simply deny that there is an inconsistency at all. And yes, you can do that. I've seen people who convince themselves that they believe in one thing while acting out in a way that opposes said belief. I do believe we call that hypocrisy, and I'm convinced it's usually used as a dysfunctional coping mechanism. You can kind of see the denial in Claude as he's roaming around the palace with Felix after waking up with amnesia. He's surrounded by things that challenge his grieving mindset, but somehow distances himself from the whole affair. And this is why the royal portrait scene is absolute genius. It removes the option for Claude to deny anything. The man in the portrait is clearly Claude, and that man is happy. Well, says Claude, now I have to deal with all this mental baggage on top of my emotional baggage. So I hope you can understand where I'm coming from when I say that Claude takes actions to remove Athanasia so that he can be miserable in peace. It's deliciously twisted because it seems so counterintuitive that someone would actively try to make themselves miserable. But I'm sure we all can find real examples of that lurking around. Heck, even one of my all-time favorite TV characters tries to make himself miserable at every opportunity. And it's no surprise either. Grief is captivating to watch so long as you're not the one experiencing it. Huh. You know, I'm a bit concerned that this video might be revealing a part of me that I don't want others to see. But let's face it.
You and I are not so different.
Thank you for watching this hot mess of a video. If you liked it, then please consider liking and or subscribing to the channel. If you didn't like it, then once more, please do not send the ninjas or the death squad. I do have plans to make another video to cover the remainder of season 2, but that won't be for a little while. Well, actually, that depends, but that's all I have to say for now. Weebtooner, signing off.